It's funny, even the yes, this is real tweet, some people thought even that was like a confirmation he was hacked.
I thought it was a hack.
I wonder what Woj is thinking about all this. He's like, are you kidding me? This happened right after I left.
The fact that now he gets to be near the water, like that's a big deal for him. You know how much Jokic loves his pool and his river rafting. No recruiting, Luke. When it comes to like these conditioning concerns and like, can we commit to this guy? Like, is he going to be able to be the guy and get it done? And they just don't see him as that guy. They're talking about him like he's Zion Williamson. What are we talking about here?
An athlete doesn't have to look like Russell Westbrook, for example, who's like super ripped and
crazy.
stuff.
He's also
you don't really need to look like that to be successful as a professional athlete, that like we can accept different body types. I think Luka was proving that. You can say, yeah, we're designed to win now. If you don't win the championship this year, can we look at it as a failure?
I've seen Mavs fans say they think it's a failure even if they win the championship this year. Welcome back to What's in a Game. I'm Grace Jean here with my co-host Will Jones. How are you doing today, Will, on this beautiful Tuesday? Now it is 3 days after an earth-shattering deal.
Yeah, every day that goes by, the more opportunity you have to process this. A couple of days ago, I was shocked, obviously, as everyone was, and now it's getting a little more real. Like, he just had his introductory press conference, and I saw Rob Pelinka sitting on a real stage with real Luka right there.
Took a picture with JJ Redick and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, it feels like this news has sort of come at me in waves over the last few days, where every so often they get really consumed everything, because the Nuggets had a game on Saturday. It was early in the day, if I recall. I don't even know. Whatever. This trade happens or is announced on Saturday night. So it's all I can think about for a couple days. Then the Nuggets have a game again against who'd they play last night? The Pelicans?
Pelicans.
And I was thinking about the Nuggets and all that and the game and analyzing it. And then after the game, I just had another moment that was like, I cannot believe the Dallas Mavericks traded Luka Dončić. Oh yeah, that happened.
I mean, it's a really funny trade, right? To have it be like the biggest, most surprising trade of all time, but also maybe the worst trade of all time is very juicy. So
yeah, we were talking on the show, I think during our awards show, about like where Nico Harrison could fit in a potential executive of the year award.
Yeah, because that mid-season trade was not bad last season, but damn, he's going off the rails.
Yeah, I've never seen somebody tank their stock this steeply this quickly. So we're going to talk about the actual deal. Just as a quick programming note, we were going to do a pre-trade deadline show on the Denver Nuggets, what they need. It honestly seems like it's going to be a pretty quiet trade deadline for the Denver Nuggets. So rather than going through all of those possible yet highly improbable scenarios, we're going to talk about this trade. And if anything happens on Thursday, we will definitely cover it on our post-trade deadline special at the end of this week. Right, let's get into it. The Dallas Mavericks traded Luka Dončić, Maxi Kleber, and Markieff Morris to the Lakers for Anthony Davis. That's the other half of this deal. That's like, oh yeah, Anthony Davis is going to the Dallas Mavericks, and it's literally like a footnote in this story. But the Mavericks also got Max Christie and a 2029 first-round pick in a 3-team deal with Utah. So the Lakers sent Jalen Hood-Schifino, who had really been out of the rotation, and Dallas threw in a second to help facilitate that deal too, which is incredibly funny. Obviously, when this first bit of the trade came out, like the initial kind of framework, everybody thought Shams was hacked, and I mean literally everyone. So I was just kind of I was watching a cooking show with my fiance, and I get a message from one of my group chats. It's like, Shams was hacked. So I go check his account and I read the tweet. I'm like, he was obviously hacked, right? Everyone on my timeline also saying like, this is the funniest hack of all time. Last night I was watching some highlight reaction videos. One of our mutual favorites, Zite. And his reaction to the Nuggets Hornets game on Saturday, he was filming it when this trade news came down.
I didn't know that it was the Nuggets game that he left because I knew that he was recording, but I didn't know which game.
He was recording the Nuggets game. The Shams news comes down. He's like, "What? Is this real?" He pauses the highlights. And he's like, "No, he was hacked. He was hacked." And then he finishes the Nuggets video, and I guess he films he's a Lakers fan, so of course he's going to film a really extensive reaction to getting Luka Dončić for his team thereafter. Will, when you got this news, why don't you just take us through your journey of this? Because I know you were actually away this weekend.
Yeah, I was driving back from a weekend mountain trip here in Colorado, and so I missed the news for like 4 hours or something, I think. And so I didn't go through the guessing stage of whether he was hacked or not. I wonder what I would have believed at the time.
Literally everyone was saying it. It's like so unbelievable that I was like, okay, obviously.
I probably would have just been waiting to see what other information came out until it was real, just like everyone else. But I don't know. It's just I've never seen anything like it. I think I just audibly gasped. Like I saw the thing that I saw was the ESPN headline on the website because I got texts about it and messages check Twitter. Right. And
that's when it started to sink in for everyone when it was also coming from the ESPN official account.
Right. I wonder what Woj is thinking about all this. He's like, are you kidding me? This happened right after I left.
True.
It's funny, even the yes, this is a real tweet. Some people thought even that was a confirmation he was hacked.
I thought it was a hack. So Shams ends up quote tweeting himself for a message that has more of the specific details of the trade, including the Jalen Hood-Schifino going to the Jazz part. But he starts it with quote, "Yes, this is real. Sources tell ESPN," and then the full trade details. I was listening to Shams on ESPN on NBA Today, and he was describing what it was like getting the news, getting the messages about the deal. He thought his phone was hacked when he was getting the information about this deal. Nobody believed that the Mavs were trading Luka Dončić, let alone for this package of, yes, Anthony Davis, of course, Max Christie, and a 2029 first-round pick.
Yeah, I mean, you agree with most people that would assess that this is not anywhere close to enough for Luka.
Fully, yeah. Because I was like, okay, let's go through the rationales, the initial rationales that were put out that night and in the following days, right? Because after a deal like this, you absolutely need to explain yourself as the general manager. And we've also gotten some leaks from other sources within the team. So the first, night when this comes out, the first thing that is kind of put out there by Nico Harrison, the general manager of the Mavs, is, quote, "I believe that defense wins championships. I believe that getting an all-defensive center and an all-NBA player with a defensive mindset gives us a better chance. We're built to win now and in the future." We learn at his press conference the next day, which he does before the Mavs get completely run out of the state, basically, in their game against the Cavs, where they give up 50 points in the first quarter.
Oh, yeah. Sad.
That Nico Harrison's definition of winning in the future is 3 to 4 years from now. He doesn't think in terms of 10-year windows or whatever. He's like, I won't even be here. Whatever. He's there with Jason Kidd, who was very awkward during that whole press conference.
So he said the next 3 to 4 years from now, from this season.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, because I was wondering if he thought
when he said now and in the
season.
future, he means now and in 3 to 4 years, depending on Anthony Davis's health and whatever, and Kyrie Irving. Because now they're building around Kyrie Irving.
I just want to say it makes it almost more confusing because why wouldn't you just, I guess I know Luka's hurt, but why wouldn't you ride out the season and go for it with Luka again? Because even if you make this trade now, it's still so unlikely they'd win the championship because their seed is low because Luka's already missed time. So it's like, you can say, yeah, we're designed to win now. If you don't win the championship this year, can we look at it as a failure since that's what he just said? Or does he expect that?
I think it's a failure. I've seen Mavs fans say this. They think it's a failure even if they win the championship this year.
Right, because then it's the future is sunk. Yeah.
Not just that, but the connection, the emotional connection that all of those fans had to Luka and how they feel about their franchise is on the map because of Dirk Nowitzki, a star who stayed loyal to their franchise his entire career, and that fan base appreciated like maybe more than any franchise has appreciated a singular star besides the Lakers and Kobe for the same reason, right? Like that and him bringing them championships.
Yeah.
And now it's like he's kind of broken that emotional covenant between the fan base and their superstar. And it's interesting because, so I love this, Will. You have actually been taking an extended break from social media for some time now. So you actually don't necessarily know about some of the details with respect to whether what the Mavs organization's relationship to Luka was right now. Which is why you're asking the question of like, why wouldn't they just keep him and ride out this season? If it's like, it's not like Luka is some like developing prospect that isn't a win now player. Literally took you to the NBA Finals last year, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll kind of cue it up with the next quotes from the press conference on Sunday from Nico Harrison. He says, there's other teams that were loading up that he was going to be able to decide, make his own decision at some point of whether he wants to be here or not, whether we want to supermax him or not, or whether he wants to opt out. So I think we had to take all that into consideration. And I feel like we got out in front of what could have been a tumultuous summer. Like, what's your reaction to Nico Harrison basically saying, I didn't want to deal with all the drama that could have come with whether we wanted to give Luka Dončić the Supermax or not this summer?
I mean, it fits into the stuff we've been talking about with the new CBA and how you have to be careful about what contracts you give out because it's a lot of money to give to a star. I wouldn't have put Luka in that class of players to be concerned about. It's not like he's Jamal Murray, which there are interesting parallels to since he had injury, lower body injury concerns and conditioning concerns, and we still maxed him. And, you know, I talked about being a stand-up organization, trusting your stars anyway, paying them, and then kind of figuring it out later. But this seems like that sounded horrible to Nico Harrison. He was like, no, I'm not even getting myself in that scenario. I wonder if Luka actually did anything to indicate that he was unhappy or wanted to leave, because that has been a narrative around the Mavs and Luka for a long time, is you got to keep him happy or he'll ask out, because that's what happens to every star, right? That's not like Jokic, essentially. But
it has been a narrative. And I wanted to read that quote from Nico's press conference because he was very mealy-mouthed about the whole thing. Like, talking about whether, like, other teams loading up and him deciding whether he wants to be here or not, whatever. Okay, number one, the Supermax was created to help, in terms of its intent, right? To help like non-major franchises be able to keep their franchise stars because it gives them the option to pay them more than any other team would be allowed to pay them in free agency. Because the Supermax allows you to pay your star 35% of the salary cap in terms of like their annual salary over 5 years. Any other team is only allowed to give a veteran player in the NBA up to 4 years and only up to 30% of the salary cap. In terms of what that means for Luka Dončić, it would have been the difference between signing a $350 million deal or $345 million versus a deal that is about $100 million less than that from any other team, should he have chosen to not extend next summer and then have 1 year left on his deal and then go into free agency. Everybody takes a Supermax. Everybody has taken a Supermax when offered to Supermax. It was originally created in the aftermath of KD going to the Warriors because OKC couldn't keep him because he didn't want, I guess, obviously he didn't want to be there, and they weren't in a position to offer him more than anybody else could. That's not the case with Dallas. So that's one. That's just like the cold hard, like on paper, why I never believed that Luka wasn't going to take the Supermax deal.
Yeah, he would.
Number two, in that press conference, Nico was asked whether they'd had any indication that Luka wouldn't sign with them. The answer was no. He's like, well, no, we didn't have any indication that he wouldn't. They just said, well, we don't know if he would have.
But he was more worried.
I think the only reason that he wouldn't have is because he says here in his list of concerns whether we want to supermax him or not, whether they want to give him that contract. And from all reports, because of their concerns with his conditioning and his health, By the way, he's played 80% of his regular season games, played 100 games last season. He was playing 40 minutes a game. His dad was on all the social medias, like in all the comment sections, expounding upon this because he's understandably upset that his son is seemingly being dragged in a smear campaign that's meant to justify indefensible trade. Those were their concerns, and they didn't want to supermax him over that. So the only reason that he would have gone somewhere else is because they wouldn't offer him the supermax. It was in their hands.
Yeah.
They didn't want to extend him.
Yeah, they're kind of talking out of both sides of their mouth because it's like, we didn't want to supermax him, but earlier they said they were worried about the drama of him having this supermax and like being difficult and asking out like a James Harden situation. And it's just, which one is it? It's clear they don't believe in Luka as like the guy. And that's
what it comes down to, right?
Mm-hmm. And you just never see organizations even just turn on someone like this, let alone trade them, let alone talk trash to them. How's that going to affect any other players who want to join their team where it's like, what the hell? Anyway.
And, in the aftermath of this trade, obviously players, stars around the league are being asked about this trade and how they feel about it. Ant's like, I'm scared. he was like half joking. He's like, Tim, if you're going to trade me, let me know. Giannis made some comments about, and KD too, kind of to the effect of players are held to a different standard when it comes to loyalty to these organizations, but these organizations are not loyal to players. And this is true for non-stars. Like, role players get traded literally all the time, right? Like, we talk about this as a players league and player empowerment and all that. It's really just star empowerment. But even under that backdrop, like, it's true. The organization can trade you at any time unless you have a no trade clause, as Bradley Beal and LeBron James do. That's that class of player. I can say this is just another thing I wanted to add to this because we just had Luka's introductory press conference to the Los Angeles Lakers this morning. Just another thing that could help us, as you stated, process this, process all of this information. He was asked point blank, like, how it felt like finding out about the trade and would he have wanted to stay in Dallas. He's like, yeah, like he had just bought a $15 million house there. And there were reports that he, was incredibly upset and cried even when he found out the trade news late Saturday night, which, I mean, for us, he said he was almost asleep. I'm in the Pacific Coast right now, and it was 10:30 at night, I believe, here. So in Dallas, are they central? It's 12:30 a.m. Getting ready for bed when you find out this news.
Did he find out like through the organization at least? Like, did they call him before it dropped?
At the press conference, Nico's press conference on Sunday, he said that he texted Luka, but he hadn't heard back from him. And he said, I don't think he wants to hear from me right now. I think Luka Anthony Davis got a phone call. I don't know how he found out, to be honest. I would hope that it came via a phone call as opposed to learning about it in the news. I doubt that he learned about it in the news, but he probably didn't learn about it that much sooner than we did.
Okay, yeah. Any other tidbits from his press conference you thought were notable?
He really loved Dallas. Like, that was very clear to me. I think he's probably going to end up staying in LA. We can talk about the Lakers angle of this, which is important because now they traded their franchise star for a new, younger franchise star in Luka Dončić, who's going to be playing alongside LeBron James. But they can't offer him a Supermax contract. Yeah. They can only offer him a max, which is the same that any team can offer him in a year, less than a year and a half, when he comes up for extension. Not extension, but potentially free agency. So if Luka chooses not to extend with the Lakers, there's going to be, at least right away, they're going to have to work for him to want to stay. And I think they're going to do that. And I think they're probably going to succeed because Luka he was really serious and a little bit timid. He was not using a lot of words in his answers at this press conference, but his face lit up when he talked about the fact that now he gets to be near the water. That's a big deal for him. We know how much Jokic loves his pool and his river rafting. So I'm like, okay, No recruiting, Luke.
Hey, we jumped in the pool after we won the championship. It's the same thing.
That's true. That's true. That was the first thing. It's like his signature. And he likes JJ Redick a lot, right?
Oh, yeah.
He was a player. JJ played on the Mavs briefly, kind of at the end of his, when he was cooked. And Luka kind of took some digs, and he's like, he could barely move.
Yeah.
But
that's the one clip I saw.
Now he gets to play with JJ. He didn't mention this, but something else that others have pointed out is that Dorian Finney-Smith was one of his best friends on the Mavs when he was there, and now he gets to play with him in LA also. I think he's going to end up staying there, and I think they're going to do their best to make him happy. Because why the hell wouldn't you do everything you possibly could to keep this gift that was dropped in your lap by Nico Harrison's ignorance?
What, are you kidding me? Rob Pelinka, it's all hit. He gets 100% credit for that.
Well, you know what Rob Pelinka gets credit for? It's another set of new details that we got.
That's what I wanted to bring up, yeah. But I think you're right that he'll probably stay with the Lakers. I mean, it is LA, and I've said on the show before that I don't really believe in the front office of the Lakers because I don't really like how Jeannie Buss runs the organization. I don't think Rob Pelinka is a good team builder. And they kind of just rely on the LA mystique to attract free agents, which I think they'll have a better chance of doing with Luka and just a more open roster that will come down the line, of course, because LeBron will retire and such.
And it probably helps that Rob negotiated this down because now they have more assets to use to improve the roster.
Exactly. So I wouldn't be surprised if, he stays with the Lakers too, even though, you never really know, but it seems unlikely. Plus, they were it wasn't like any other team had a chance to get him, but they're technically the team that wanted him, I guess. But how much does that mean if you were the only team in a negotiation for him?
I mean, the reason, so we didn't even talk about the backstory of this deal. 3 weeks ago, Nico Harrison's talking to Rob Pelinka in a coffee shop in Dallas. I'm assuming this was when the Lakers are in town for a game. And basically throws out the idea of hey, would you trade for Luka Dončić? And that's where this all started. And those two, and then the owners, were the only people who were privy to these talks happening. Even Danny Ainge, the GM of the Utah Jazz, who was involved in this deal, didn't learn about what it was until 30 minutes before it went down. It was ugh. And people were pointing out it's funny because they actually own, I think it's top 4 protected pick of the Lakers in 2027. So he just helped them be better in that year. And he's probably damn it. They probably would have been seriously in the tank with just Anthony Davis as their franchise guy, with LeBron out of the picture, probably in all likelihood by then. So the initial outlines of the deal apparently were, they got, like I said, Anthony Davis, Max Christie, and a 2029 first round pick. Apparently, another first round pick and Dalton Connect were initially on the table, and Rob Pelinka, which I still don't think is enough, and Rob Pelinka negotiated Nico Harrison down from Dalton Connect and the other first round pick. But one of the things that was pointed out, and this is another just own goal by Nico Harrison, having to do with getting squeezed in these negotiations with the one guy that he chose to talk to about this, his old buddy Rob Pelinka from his days at Nike when Rob was Kobe's agent. He's been complaining about Luka's conditioning, and Rob basically threw that back at him. And also pointed out, hey, we're kind of taking on a risk. We don't know if we're going to be able to keep this franchise star in Los Angeles. And Nico was yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, well, that's what's so interesting about it is that's kind of what he alluded to with the whole we didn't want to pay him the Supermax kind of idea because he might want to ask out and we don't want to deal with that. When Rob is saying, I don't know if Luka will stay in 2026, Nico's oh, that makes sense because I'm worried about that too. And it's just are you kidding me? Who cares? Just say tough if you want Luka,
and
this
also
great
the
player.
Conditioning concerns. That's another thing that was brought up between them, which is I'm sure he said all of this to Pelinka when Pelinka was well, why would you want to trade Luka? Not that I'm sure Rob Pelinka asked minimal questions after this was initially presented to him. but you have to ask some.
Yeah, it's just horrible negotiating by Nico. No matter how you like slice it, these details that are coming out just prove how trash of a negotiation it was.
Rob Pelinka said at the introductory press conference today that he didn't like to think about it as a negotiation. He liked to think about it as a partnership. And how can we both just get to the end of this deal where I have Luka Dončić and you don't, basically.
I wonder how many times he used that as an agent, that line of being a partnership. That was probably like his go-to.
It's insane. It's insane. It was Nico's idea to keep this quiet, and Rob like agreed, like both sides. Well, obviously the Lakers side wants to keep this quiet. So like if this leaks, like we just don't get this guy because other teams will enter the bidding if they find out that, Luka's kind of up for grabs right now. And obviously Luka would get involved and just be like, well,
yeah,
like, where do I want to go?
Because Luka could just be like, I'm not signing with the Lakers to prevent a trade.
I won't extend with whatever team.
Which
is why Nico didn't want him in it. Yeah. Even though I think it's just dumb because I think they ended up on a package of the total value of which is the lowest you could have possibly gotten in a situation where you have no leverage.
Yeah.
But you chose to do that. And then like justified it by saying like you went about it in this way because you said, well, we didn't want to lose all our leverage. And then you got a package that made it look like you lost all your leverage.
It just makes me question what Nico Harrison believes other than the fact that he just doesn't like Luka and doesn't believe he can be a guy that can win them a championship clearly for some reason, which I think he's wrong about. And he was clearly like tunnel visioned on AD. Like that's just who he seemingly wanted. He wanted this defensive
really
guy.
Likes Anthony Davis. Apparently that's been like a thing. Like he's been kind of laser focused on him for a while now. And I just I do want to, we're talking about the, ins and outs of the trade package that they got for Luka. And what I'm going to say kind of pertains to that because it's about like Luka and how the Mavs organization did or apparently did not value him. And Nico Harrison in particular did not value him. But the question of like trading Luka at all in the first place is wild to me. And the fact that this stuff that keeps coming out of Nico and the organization about how they were really worried about his conditioning, how he's apparently pushing 270 pounds at like 6'7", 6'8", whatever he is. And, like Luka's not in the best shape. Like that's not, I'm not gonna argue that this has been a thing. And despite that, he's been first team all NBA like almost since he's been in the league. All-star like every year. Just took you to the NBA finals. Like brought a team in the Minnesota Timberwolves that was a game away from being the 1 seed in the Western Conference last season in a really like stacked season for that conference in particular, to their knees in the Western Conference finals. Gentlemen swept them. Goes on the road for 4 series in a row. And they're talking about, and he's a generational offensive talent. Like everyone knows how good Luka is as a scorer, as a passer, as your offensive engine, as your hub, as your everything, right? I don't think he's on Jokic's level, but he's literally the next level down. Okay. Like, what are we talking about here? And they're talking about him when it comes to like these conditioning concerns and like, can we commit to this guy? Like, is he going to be able to be the guy and get it done? And you've already said like they just don't see him as that guy. They're talking about him like he's Zion Williamson. What are we talking about here? This isn't a situation where, oh my God, Zion, he came into the league, he had all this talent, and it just hasn't been realized. Like he hasn't been healthy like at all. It's not on the like Luka's not on that level of like missing games because of like injuries and stuff like that. And even when he has been healthy in recent years in particular, it's like, okay, that's like pretty good, like all-star production, like whatever. No, Luka is generational.
Yeah.
And they had just put the perfect team around him to cover up for his defensive mistakes. Took them to the NBA Finals. They went on a massive run at the end of the last season in the regular season and then went to the NBA Finals. They got better over last summer. Whether you think like Klay Thompson can be a starter level player or not, he's definitely an upgrade on Tim Hardaway Jr., as I've stated here before. Perfect team around him. Got him multiple lob threats just all over the place with Lively and Gafford. And they had Derek Jones Jr., but now he's on the Clippers. So okay, no more of that. But you have rim protecting centers, again, to cover up for all of that. And when they were healthy, like, this team was great. And there were these reports coming out about, all of the people that Nico Harrison had gotten rid of or lost in the case of Jalen Brunson since he came to the organization. Dorian Finney-Smith being one of them. Apparently, Luka is one of Luka's trainers, his massage guy. Getting rid of Boban, who was kind of their Vlatko at that point, on the bench, as well as a few others. One of the assistant coaches, who was one of Luka's favorites. And there was a quote that ESPN got sometime in the last 2 years where Luka says, "They get rid of everybody I like." And he was like, apparently half joking. And I kind of wonder, like, genuinely, because they're telling us this now, that we just don't think we just don't think he's the guy. We didn't want to supermax him. I wonder if they wanted him to ask out so that they'd have an out to trade him. Not now, obviously. They don't want him to ask out now, but if they wanted him to ask out sooner. Like, I almost wonder if Nico Harrison thinks, man, we made it to the NBA Finals, but maybe if we had been, say, knocked out by the Thunder in round 2, because that was a really rough series for Luka until the last 2 games, right? Like, that was, I think, his worst series of the playoffs, maybe of his playoff career. And he was definitely injured for part of it, whatever. Kind of shakes it off by the end of that series, and then, like, is pretty good through the rest of the playoffs, at least on offense, right? I wonder if Nico Harrison wishes the Thunder had knocked them out in round 2 so that he could have just traded Luka this summer.
There was this article on The Athletic, which I don't know if you saw, about the different body types, and it featured Jokic and Mahomes and even Luka. It came out like a day before this trade, and it was like,
really?
It was all about the dad bod and like different archetypes of bodies.
Mahomes a dad bod, really?
By the way that the article defined dad bod, which is different than I think.
Maybe a dad bod for football, but I feel like a lot of football guys are kind of just really big dad bods.
Well, I think the article talks about how it defines dad bod, and I think it's different than how people colloquially think about it. But just like that, an athlete doesn't have to look like Russell Westbrook, for example, who's like super ripped and stuff.
He's awesome.
You don't really need to look like that to be successful as a professional athlete. That like we can accept different body types, and like we've been dealing with, Nuggets fans are used to this with Jokic, how he's not the typical looking super athlete, and yet he's the best player in the world. And I think Luka was proving that. And I don't know, like Jokic has said that while he had success and was able to come to a decision on his own as a player to take diet more seriously and take work more seriously and conditioning more seriously, because he's one of the best conditioned athletes in the league, I think. And Luka's only 25, so there was still a chance he could have gotten to that point, and the Mavs just didn't give it to him. They clearly believed he wouldn't get there. Jokic used to say, I kind of like being a little bit heavier, not super skinny, because it like helps me get position in the post and stuff like that. And Luka, clearly he's a big point forward, and he can bully people too, like we saw in the playoffs, him like single-handedly taking on assignments and just bullying them in ISO, one of the best ISO scorers. I wonder if he thinks about his weight in that way, where it like can give him an advantage, because he still plays really well despite these like concerns about his weight and stuff, in my opinion. They were making those moves, like you were saying, building around him, and then they just quit all of a sudden and got AD, and I just don't know.
Well, it puts those moves in a different light, right? Because, I mean, we talked about this when we were thinking about, is Nico Harrison in the running for an executive of the year type thing for his trade deadline moves, and like the way that he rebuilt this team around Luka to like accentuate his strengths, but also, cover up for his weaknesses. Was he just not, maybe he wasn't seeing it as that at all. And we should talk about this because the Mavs made another trade today, trading Quentin Grimes and a second round pick to the Sixers for Caleb Martin. A lot of people are saying it's like, well, they didn't want to have to pay Grimes this summer. He's coming up on, I think, restricted free agency. Didn't know if they'd be able to keep him, so they wanted to just replace him with another wing, whatever. I think Quentin Grimes is better than Caleb Martin, but if you think you're not going to be able to keep him, like, I guess that makes sense. That was another like, oh, wow, I can't believe they got that thrown in to the Tim Hardaway Jr. trade with the Pistons this last summer, right? Because that's like just another good, two-way wing piece that you can. And yeah, he's been really great for them this season. But it makes you wonder, like when we talk about these moves and whether they end up working, it might not be for the reasons that the GM originally intended, right? It seems like it was a bigger crapshoot, frankly, than we initially thought. And even if it wasn't, maybe these moves had nothing. Like maybe getting Derek Lively had less to do with getting Luka a lob threat that he'd been asking for. He's talked about this in pressers before, that he'd been asking for years, and more like, we need a rim protector. We just need a rim protector, because he believes that defense wins championships. He said that.
Yeah.
And the other part of this is that, and Nico said this in the press conference the other day, they really want to capitalize on Kyrie Irving's win now window. They are building their team around Kyrie Irving with Anthony Davis as their 1A, 1B, 1A, 1B, whatever.
I think 1B. Although, I don't know, Nico seems to want to be the 1A.
Day, right? Because I've seen games where it's like, okay, this is a Spencer Dinwiddie takeover game, even though Kyrie's on the floor. I don't know. Right? That's the other part of this, is that I'm just like, you had built this whole team around Luka. Well, maybe they hadn't. Maybe they were just like, we're just trying to build a defensive juggernaut. Maybe we're building around Kyrie, right?
Yeah.
Everyone's like, wow, they got so lucky with that. Not lucky, but they did get luck that the Kyrie deal worked out, in that Kyrie has been like good for them and consistent for the most part, and all that hasn't been like a trouble area, and who knows what that's going to look like moving forward. Now that you've, I don't know, given him the keys to your franchise. Kyrie Irving has a player option this summer, by the way.
Yeah, that'll be
I don't know if he's going to stay in Dallas or not. Apparently he and Anthony Davis are friends, but yeah, it's just, it recontextualizes a lot for me. All of the things that I'm hearing coming out now in terms of their rationale for this.
Yeah. If I was Kyrie, I would love to have a conversation with Nico Harrison, because I would need some type of reassurance on some level, but because, you know, Kyrie's had a lot of difficulties in the league with other franchises and caused drama with other teams, of course, and he's been fine on Dallas, so...
They've been harping about how Luka was not right for their culture.
Yeah, it's
and
wild.
I'm like, Kyrie Irving, culture setter. That's what we're... Anthony Davis, culture, like tone setter? Question mark?
Yeah,
like, what are we talking about?
I just really question what Nico and the whole organization and this new ownership group, which I totally forgot Mark Cuban wasn't involved in anymore, which makes sense because he wouldn't have let this happen, as other people have pointed out, I believe, because he loved the fact that they drafted Luka. I just don't get what they value as an organization, because, I mean, obviously they said defense and all that, but and the culture, whatever culture Kyrie provides. I think they said that he's been like a great leader and stuff. But
he has been good for them. Like I don't want to. That's the only reason I know that that's the case is because a lot of people have been like actively looking for, like, okay, yeah, like Kyrie actually has been the opposite of bad for them, which is what was expected. But are you going to rely on that?
It was kind of like what we thought Kyrie was going to do when he went to Boston, and being like, I'm going to be the guy now, even though it's like he has AD still. So it's not like he's working with nothing, but obviously Boston Celtics were not ready to have Kyrie. They had their own trajectory. Then he went to the Nets and that all fell apart. But with the Mavs, if you want to talk more a little bit about them and get into like their
Let's talk about the actual basketball fits in this case, because it's a monumental trade. I'm really still processing all of the layers of like the rationale and the reasoning and what it means for these franchises kind of long term. But in terms of the basketball fit, I do think that the Mavs are going to take in the short term a step forward, so at least from where they were, because obviously Luka was injured, he wasn't playing, and they were on a skid, and they still are on a skid right now. AD has an abdominal strain, and he's out for a little while longer, probably till after the All-Star break, if I had to guess. But the Lakers are going to take a step backwards because they don't have a center, and I'm not sure about the Luka LeBron fit on offense and all of this stuff, right? But with the Mavs, once AD's healthy and everybody's playing, I do think that they're going to take a big step forward defensively. Not like, I don't think they're going to be top three. Some people were saying they're going to be a top three defense. I think the top three defenses in the NBA, and we should talk about this maybe as a longer term trend, are like psychotic. They're these ridiculous young teams that just like force a bunch of turnovers on you. It's the Thunder, the Magic, and the Rockets.
Right. Yeah,
And the team that is kind of like rocketing up into that set isn't a young team, but they force a lot of turnovers. It's the Clippers. That's really interesting. Is that becoming a new meta? I don't know. I don't know what the Mavericks, I don't think, have been like a high turnover forcing team, even when they are a top defense, like say the run that they made at the end of last regular season and their best stretches, like in the playoffs and such. They're just really good rim protecting team. It's not that they don't force turnovers. It's just like, that's not like their thing. Right. But you're going to have a Kyrie and AD led offense. The Mavericks have been, I don't know what date Luka went out with his injury, his most recent injury, but he's been out for the entire month of January, and they were 22nd in offense in the month of January. Kyrie was also missing for a stretch of that, for sure, at the beginning of the month. So that should be factored in, but they haven't really improved since he's been back. So what different element do you think AD brings to them offensively they didn't already have in terms of like their lob threats with the other bigs?
I mean, lob-wise, I think he's the same as... I mean, he's more dynamic as a lob threat than Gafford is.
Oh, yeah, than Gafford for sure.
But, you know, with Lively, I think it's relatively the same.
And it helps to have AD now because Lively has also been out with injury. He hurt himself... actually at that last game against the Nuggets, he hurt his ankle and he's going to be out till at least April, I believe, like maybe early to mid-April is when he's getting reevaluated. So,
I mean, I think he's just going to play really well next to Kyrie on offense, even if it's not like the most.
What does that look like? Like, what does that mean to play well on offense next to Kyrie for AD specifically? Because Kyrie is not LeBron, right?
I still think he'll be good on handoffs and even just pick and roll with Kyrie. Like, I like how Kyrie can operate in that. AD, like I think he's really good in the post. Obviously, not as good on double teams in the post, but a lot of the times his success in being like an otherworldly offensive player was when he could shoot, like if he could shoot a three or just a jumper at all, which has gone down, I believe, his jumpers. Like it started out okay the beginning of the season, but isn't as good lately.
He was actually on fire to start the season.
I mean, it's AD. He has nights where he goes off and other nights where he doesn't. He's like so inconsistent, and I don't know if that's because he was tired of being on the Lakers and with LeBron and kind of was just like in a malaise and too in complacent type of mindset with that team because they'd been together so long. Maybe, like I said, or, you know, I talked about this with you earlier about, you know, Jared Dudley was a player on the Lakers in the bubble when they won. He was like a DJ role where he was kind of like a player coach.
And Kidd was on the coaching staff.
Yeah, and Kidd was an assistant coach. So they're like familiar with AD, which I wondered if that played into Nico's like tunnel vision on him because he had people who were advocating for AD. Like, if we trade Luka, what player do you want? They're like, AD's probably.
I don't think that he talked to anybody about trading Luka, but yeah. I do think that he was fixated on AD, and just a point on that. During that press conference that Nico had, Kidd was sitting next to him that whole time, looking like really kind of awkward and very much had a.
Well, he knows the fans are pissed. Why he does not want to get involved? Yeah.
But Nico was saying when he got a question about Kidd, kind of like, were you involved? Like, what kind of input do you have on like the kind of players you want, whatever? And Nico was like, no, I didn't talk to him about this, but like Kidd and I, we have a really special connection. I just kind of know the kinds of players that he likes, so we don't have to talk about things and whatever. And Kidd was like, yeah, I do think that Nico probably knew that Kidd liked AD. I think that it's been talked about in the past, like if the Mavs were going to make another big move, it would have been to pair AD with Luka. So it's possible that they talked about that, like getting AD in the context of keeping Luka.
That would have been awesome. Because the Lakers wanted Kyrie.
Us, but...
I don't know if the Lakers would have accepted Kyrie for AD. I mean, Kyrie was rumored to the Lakers before. I mean, it
would have been like Mavs didn't have the draft capital, but it was like a thing that was put out into the ether.
Yeah.
Of like, oh, what if they could do this? Like, how would it get done?
What the Mavs kind of remind me of now is a little bit of the Wolves, where they have like well, I know Lively's hurt, so until he comes back and all that, and Gafford can play a double big, I guess. And they do play more at the level and have bigs rotate rather than, like the double big roamer thing. But they can do that now if they want. And AD's good at that. So they can obviously deploy that, and they probably should if they're smart. And that was something that was annoying for the Nuggets, obviously, when we played the Wolves, when they had Cat and Rudy. Like, do you see the Mavs going far and going to the finals? I mean, they'll have a good defense, but it's like there are certain things you need to
make the playoffs
cover
first.
Yeah, that's an issue. And they
I'm
have
like,
injuries
I don't
right
know
now.
what this offense is going to look like. Right now, I can tell you the Mavs are sitting in. Hang on, I got to refresh this. The Mavs are sitting in 8th in the Western Conference, and they're basically tied in record with 4 other teams that are below them. Yeah. And they have the worst record of the top 11 teams in the West in their last 10 games. So they're on a skid, and AD isn't playing yet. So they need to, hit the Jets and not just try to hold serve, because I think some other teams are going to,
we haven't talked about this yet, but we will. But the Spurs got Fox, so it's just another team down there that's playing.
Yeah, that's true.
Competing for that spot, so it's going to be tough. But let's say
they're several games behind the Mavs, though. So I don't think we'll talk more about that deal. But I don't think the Spurs are going to be able to catch up. It's more like Warriors, Suns, Kings. I don't think the Warriors will either. But it's like Suns and Kings are really the threats.
Yeah.
Behind Dallas there.
So, but even like next season, because this happened in the middle of the season, Luka was gone, so their record's like much worse than you would expect. But just as like a general team, I think everyone agrees they're going to have a good defense. I don't know how good. I don't know if a really good defense translates to them winning titles yet, because you have to also have an MVP level player. I think is like one of the requirements where you like go down the list of champions.
Yeah.
A player that's MVP level is usually on your team. I can tell you
the Mavs are currently out of the top 10 defensively, which has surprised me all year, because I really just thought with their personnel, even with Luka out, they would have been able to maintain that. They're top 12, so still like good, but not great. And I do think that they'll be able to rock it up into like that top 6 area, because right now Boston's in 6th, and I really think they've taken a step back on that end this season. I'm kind of surprised they're at 6, because they were kind of lower in the top 10 before earlier in the year.
Yeah. Well, there was even a weird thing with AD at the beginning of this season where it was like their defense, the Lakers defense was better like when he wasn't playing or something. There was like a weird lineup data like that that people were citing.
That's been the case for a couple of years now, Will.
Oh, really? Years?
Yes.
Why is that?
Because his transition is bad.
He doesn't run back.
I think right now it's just like the same with him on and off the floor.
Okay.
Honestly.
Yeah.
But he doesn't make the defense better when it comes to the Lakers. I do think that he's going to improve their defense in that they lost Lively, and now they're going to have AD fill that gap.
Right.
And
that helps. Well, it helps because Luka's also dealing with injury. You don't know necessarily how he's going to be, though.
I think that like AD is not really like a floor raiser on defense. Like he's not going to help the Lakers with their personnel be better defensively. But he can raise a team's ceiling if they have other good defensive personnel. I just don't know that ceiling is going to be like a top 3 defense right now.
Yeah, this is really the panic trade of all panic trades, because it's like, yeah, Luka's kind of dealing with nagging injuries. Lively now is this big injury, so let's just trade them, get AD. We might have a chance to still win this year, but you don't, because your record's so bad.
Yeah.
You're not going to go through the playoffs as an 8 seed or something in the West and go to the finals. I would doubt, although they did it as a 5th seed last year, but you had Luka.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
I mean,
exactly.
I don't know.
They had Luka. You asked, like, do I think they could like make a finals in the Western Conference? I think they could be a good playoff team defensively for sure, because I think they just have a lot of versatility and answers on that end. And who knows what else they might do before the deadline. Like you and I were already talking about this before they made the Quentin Grimes for Caleb Martin trade. Their offense just got worse, by the way, with that move, like even worse than it was. Like they lost creation, and now they lost shooting. So Caleb Martin is not it. Everyone's going to see them play the Boston Celtics on Thursday and think I'm crazy for saying that, because Caleb Martin just becomes Michael Jordan when he plays the Boston Celtics. Actually, I think he might be listed as out for that game because he's injured, or because of like the fact that he just got traded, or that he's injured. He's also been missing a ton of time. So that's another, we have all these conditioning and availability concerns with our generational superstar, but we're going to go with Anthony Davis right now and also trade Quentin Grimes for Caleb Martin. It's interesting because they have a lot of front court depth right now. So we can talk a little bit about the fact that they're probably going to make another move with their front court for a guard, because their guard, it's just Kyrie and Jaden Hardy and Spencer Dinwiddie right now. They might want to make an upgrade at one of those spots, but they have in the front court, they've got obviously AD, Gafford, Lively. They traded Luka. Could they trade Lively? Nico doesn't care about 10 years in the future.
Anyone who got hurt, you're gone.
I mean, look, can we get our hands on Derek Lively for our 2031 first round pick? Because I'm so in if that's
if he wants to be a backup, or I guess
we weren't going to talk about Nuggets trade ideas, but now that I'm just kind of spitting ideas around, I got my wheels spinning. And they have a lot, and they have PJ also. They got rid of Maxi Kleber in the Luka deal. He's going over to the Lakers, so they did get rid of one guy, but he wasn't really playing that much. He was playing more in this past month, but when everyone's healthy, he's not really going to be playing. With 80 there, he wasn't going to be playing. Also, he's Luka's friend, right? So right. And Dwight Powell, who, doesn't play. I wouldn't be surprised if one of those guys, and Najee Marshall as well, who plays kind of small forward, power forward. Is Najee Marshall or Derek Lively going to be on the move, whether they go to the Nuggets or not? I think that's a really interesting question, and those are two names I'm going to be looking out for.
It's just funny because now they have this reputation that you can pry away anyone because Nico Harrison's psychotic, but I don't know. He would be crazy, I think, to deal Najee Marshall, but yeah, who knows what they're planning to do.
Dude, if Nico traded Derek Lively, I would.
Yeah. Well,
I would be actually not scared because I don't even know if he's going to be back this season, but I would kind of be I'm so annoyed that another team is getting this guy because he's
Please
awesome.
Go to the East if you're going to go anywhere that's not the Nuggets.
Oh my gosh. Anyway, so that's the basketball fit with the Mavs. We don't even know if their offense is going to be good enough to make the playoffs, but if they make it there, they could be dangerous. I do think there's a lot of teams at the top of the West that are vulnerable to that kind of matchup defensively, because there are so many defensive teams at the top of the West, right? It's Memphis and Houston and OKC.
Well,
so if the Mavs are coming in from the play-in, they could play any of those teams potentially in a first-round series. They won't play the Nuggets in a first-round series because I don't think they're going to, even if their offense is good, I don't know that they're going to climb up to a fifth seed.
Yeah.
And I think the Nuggets are probably going to be in that 4-5.
And they'll probably be out before then, I would think. But I hope we don't play. I don't want to play the double big lineup, even if somehow the Mavs kind of suck.
Yeah, it won't be fun. I think we can overcome it because I don't think they're beefy like the Timberwolves were.
Yeah.
And I do think that matters a lot, especially for Jokic. But they're way easier to guard. I think they're easier to guard than the Wolves were last year, and our defense wasn't even really the problem, but they're easier to guard.
That's what I was saying.
Even though Kyrie kind of can kill us, I do think that we could kind of live with that and then shut everyone else down.
I was saying that they kind of remind me of the Wolves, but just with less offensive upside. And I got a lot of disagreement from that. That people thought, with this AD and Kyrie team and Spencer Dinwiddie is more offensively potent than Ant and Cat and
Nas
Mike Conley and Nas. I was
when Jaden decides to have a good game, it's just a lot of drive and kick options.
And
they do have Najee Marshall, but again, they got getting rid of Quentin Grimes just makes me think do they not care about offense? I'll have to see what move they make to upgrade the guard position.
Yeah, for sure. I would be interested in this experiment of defense, going all in on defense, winning championships at the sacrifice of offense, which I care way more about offense than defense is one of my beliefs. But the Thunder have both, and the Celtics have both.
The Thunder have both?
Well,
I think their
SGA.
offense is incredibly... Yes, they have an offensive talent.
If you just have
that's
one
true.
player...
You surround your singular offensive talent with defense.
Which is what the Mavs did have.
That's what I thought they were doing with Luka, though.
Yeah, exactly. And now...
So I'm their formula.
Well, I guess in that sense, this can still be kind of an experiment I can see. Whereas go all in on defense. You don't have that singular offensive talent. How far does that get you?
Yeah.
Maybe we can't tell this year because of this happened mid-season and be more of an experiment for next season. But I'll be interested to see.
I had in my notes that there'd be opportunities for guys we talked about. Maybe Lively gets traded because he's injured and they're in win now mode, but Daniel Gafford is another one who might be on the chopping block, though, again, like with Lively's injury, maybe that, again, just makes it less likely. Even though they have AD, but AD doesn't like to play the 5. He wants to play at the 4. The Oklahoma City Thunder own Dallas's 2028 first-round pick. In that year, AD will be 35. Kyrie will be 36. We don't even know if Kyrie's going to be on the Mavs in that year. AD will still be under contract. So that'll be interesting. But yeah, that was the last little bit on this deal, at least for now. Who knows what else both of these teams are going to do at the deadline. We will definitely keep an eye out for that. So that does it for the show. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for listening. Please, if you like our content, remember to hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and share us with your friends, your enemies, your family, their enemies, their friends, their barbers, their dog walkers. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at What's in a Game NBA. We have all our social links in the description. And always remember that winning is fun and losing sucks, especially losing a trade to Rob Pelinka and the Los Angeles Lakers.
I know. It's Pelinka. Ugh. Don't get me started. We're done.
We're done.